Resurgence of Magnificence, Andrew Cayston's quarters. "I had no hand in this incident, my most arrogant son," said Tamarin. Not even a minute had passed since their conversation began, yet rage burned in his chest as he watched his father eyeing him with utmost disinterest and an expression of true neutrality that he'd seen so many times throughout his life. "Do you take me for an idiot, father?" shouted Andrew Cayston, angrily glaring at his father through the screen and the countless light years separating the two of them. He didn't allow him a moment to take control of the moment and twist the narrative to his advantage. It was an outlet most needed that the gaunt-looking man refused to give away willingly. Not yet, at least. "I know it was you who twisted the minds of the overtly ambitious and idiotic Tigans. It is so like you to do such a lowly thing." His glare intensified, resentment and frustration growing in his chest as his father's expression remained impassive. He'd foreseen his outburst. Of course he had, the meticulous liar and schemer that he was. Gesturing around with his arms spread wide, Andrew pressed on. "You misled those hopeful imbeciles to perform what you cannot. We had an agreement, father, and you've broken it," he exclaimed, letting out a frustrated sigh as his composure partially returned to him. "And not only content with that, but you also used Neolo to speak on your behalf after Raventomb's plunder at Rankov. Something that could have been avoided years earlier were it not for your constant interference and personal machinations, father." Andrew finished firmly, his gaze sinking into the visage of the man in front of him. Tamirin sighed tiredly. "Are you quite done spewing your complaints, Andrew?" asked the old man, earning an intense glare from his son. The head of House Cayston raised an eyebrow in amusement. "You are far more intelligent than most of your siblings ever were, alive or perished. I do not believe you to be a fool, Andrew, deluded by your own bloodthirst and personal grievances as you may be." "Deluded? You dare call me deluded? You, of all people?" Andrew asked, finishing with a dark chuckle as his hands turned to tightly closed fists. "Are you denying it, my son? Were you not expelled from the Royal Navy in disgrace for your deluded comments? The delusion that you could bring down an enemy outside the concern of our borders has clouded your vision, and so much more. Casimir is a proof of that," replied Tamirin pointedly. "Do not bring Casimir into this conversation, father," Andrew warned, eyes narrowing. "Stop avoiding the subject at hand, father. Tell me, what is your involvement against the Wraith's commoner family?" Tamirin glared at his son for a few moments, then hummed, returning to his neutral expression. "If you're looking for an admission of convoluted plans, then you shall find nothing but disappointment. I do confess that I shared words with some Tigans, as I did with almost every notable guest present at the party organized by House Tigan." Andrew was momentarily taken aback by his father's words, but only for a brief moment. Choosing to remain silent, he maintained his glare until Tamarin continued. "Let me be clear, Andrew. I did not break our pact, nor did I insinuate or suggest any course of action, much less so organize it. I made no concessions, no promises of reward, and certainly no certainties that they would be recognized in a positive light. What power do I have to reward members of another house for something that I could have done myself?" Tamirin scoffed. "I don't even know their names." "What these naive Tegans did was theirs to do alone, and theirs are the repercussions." Andrew crossed his arms, unconvinced. "Yet you spoke to them." "They will tell us the truth, that you poisoned their minds with your sweet-talking tongue to be part of a scheme that could only benefit you. I admit that I mentioned Wyatt Staples and his dramatic ascension to power, but nothing more than that. And I must press this point again, my son, that they were not the only ones I spoke with about that lowly commoner pretending to be a nobleman. Hardly was the necessity to bring his name to the forefront at all, for he was in the mouths of many and a common talking point held in contempt. Am I to blame for what others speak and the asinine decisions made by feeble, weak-willed, ambitious young bloods that lack the acumen to see such ambitions fulfilled?" Tamarin asked, eyes narrowing. "You and I know that, were I had a hand in this most unfortunate and unexpected dilemma, another fate would have befallen the mud-tossing family of that parasite suckling on the Reaper's teat." The gaunt man closed his eyes for a moment. As much as he loathed the idea of giving his father any credit, on that last regard he was correct. Had he had any direct hand in what happened, the outcome would have been another, and, most certainly, come much sooner than it did. And there was another matter to consider. "The interloopers," said Andrew, turning away from the screen. "Do you know anything at all, father?" "If I did, I would be telling you now, Andrew," replied Tamarin, followed by a deep hum. We know they exist, but not who commands them. They can't be agents, and certainly not from within the Principality. That they are mercenaries is the only logical answer. What their employers want remains clouded, but their intentions will be revealed in time. In time, Andrew agreed. Tamirin leaned forward, his hands gripping his cane tightly. Worry not, my son. You'll have your revenge one way or another. Your prey remains untouched and, as fortune would have it, within your reach. You will have your revenge. Andrew turned to his father, uncrossing his arms. Justice, father. I will have justice for what he did to Casimir. Then he narrowed his gaze once more. Let us imagine that I believe you. That you had no hand in the Taigans launching their idiotic assault upon a neutral minor house on a neutral territory. That does not excuse you for the way you used Neolo. Tamirin actually let out a chuckle at that. Now you're trying to press onto me, what? Shame? Guilt? Some fake grievance for making use of the only talent, that squalid, inept idiot of Neolo? Andrew, my son, do you see that you can make use of your intelligence and talents the right way when you set your mind to it? Again, the much older man chuckled, finding the situation amusing. Instead of praise for making use of his only redeeming quality as an orator and a spokesman, you shower me with empty indignation. But I shall humor you, despite knowing you care nothing for any of your children except for Casimir. Raising an eyebrow, Andrew replied, with a dry, Humor me? The attack caused by Raventomb was unfortunate. Most unfortunate. But nothing minor than a minor inconvenience for House Cayston, replied Tamirin nonchalantly. You describe as merely unfortunate his assault upon the Fanher system? You label as minor inconvenience the thousands of lives lost? Hundreds of lords and ladies included. The numerous ships that were lost, the ruination of almost an entire city, and the obliteration of a large mercantile and docking station hub, as only a minor inconvenience? Andrew looked upon his father with disgust as he continued. I've known you for well over 60 years, Lord Tamirin, and yet you've never ceased to impress me with your displays of apathy towards anything other than yourself and the standing of your house. Tamirin tilted his head slightly. You think so little of me, my son. The good of the Principality is also within my interest. You aren't unfamiliar with the truth that sacrifices are required to achieve a goal. The grander it is, the larger the sacrifice will be. I simply see beyond your deluded, limited vision carried by a warrior and a knight, my most valued son. Do not pretend to teach me a lesson in sacrifice, father. Not now, Andrew spat back, firm and resolute without losing his composure for a second time that evening. We were fortunate that Redford Calen was present in system to stop that misbegotten monster right at the onset of his wider ambitions. Otherwise, the tally would have been immeasurable. The report given to me by Lazkit paints a reality worse than I initially conceived. The gaunt man stopped for a moment, contemplating his thoughts as his father looked on expectantly. It was petty of him, that much was blatantly obvious, but any excuse to waste Tamirin's time was not to be wasted. He waited for just long enough to see the impatience in his expression mounting before continuing. A sizable fleet with a decommissioned Royal Navy cruiser heavily retrofitted into a parody of itself. They operated with precision and with tactics to counter and take advantage of our own. I sent Yasid to her certain doom without knowing it, confessed the man. Yet she lives, does she not? Tamirin asked coldly. What was your intended goal, Andrew? Sacrifice those ships to the monument of your glory? My goal was to destroy as many pirate ships as possible, to reduce the scope of their target and chip at them on a secondary and tertiary wave. Force them to concede and retreat or destroy them wholesale if possible? Again, he crossed his arms. Yasid was meant to claim as many of their vessels as possible, then leave before they could be overwhelmed. Dangerous but not a suicide mission. I underestimated Raventomb for a third time, and nearly paid with the blood of a daughter of the bear. Ah, so you cared not for the other blood sacrificed as long as she lived? Tamirin asked with a knowing, cruel grin. Why must you deny your own brilliance, my son? Your blood runs as thickly in your veins as mine does. Yours and mine forevermore. That may be so, but I refuse to be like you, father. Once you die and I become head of House Cayston, I shall bring our house true respect and honor, proclaimed Andrew. As swiftly as I named you heir apparent, I can revoke your status, Andrew. The old man smiled condescendingly. But that attitude is precisely what I need from you. Yet your horizons are so limited. He shook his head, making Andrew raise an eyebrow in interest. So what if that pirate parasite is in possession of the contents of a Royal Navy data core? What can he do with it? If he sells the information to our enemies, the Royal Navy will simply make new designs. If he tries to make his own ships, his meager empire will be bankrupt. This attempt at a ransacking invasion took decades to conjure and gather enough forces for him to unleash, he said, waving a hand dismissively. He will not have the strength to launch a significant assault for many more years. Decades, even. That is, if his empire doesn't collapse before such a time comes. The losses he suffered won't keep his reprobate ilk compliant for long, Andrew. Your assumptions are folly, came the reply, short and to the point. Pirates aren't as predictable as you may think, Father. They will follow a warlord, their lord, as long as he remains strong enough to keep his place. There will be adversaries, but they have no counsel to bring forth grievances, nor does their economy follow the paths of our structured systems. Old and wise you may be, but painfully naive to anything outside your own laurels and machinations. Tamirin's face turned cold, focused. His analytical eyes judged his son not as a person, but as an object. A moment later, deciding he'd found what he was looking for, he rubbed his chin and offered a singular nod. I leave such matters to you, Andrew. Too arrogant to confront the results of your doing? 12 times you prevented me from exterminating Raventomb and other scum once and for all. Worse, you ensured that many of our house vessels were downgraded or replaced by inferior patrol-level ones. Increased their numbers but reduced our overall power, protested Andrew. 4 systems ripped from House Finnegan, 2 from Starflame, and trade that has vastly favored our house and enriched our coffers during the long years since our house fell under my care are my legacy. This succession dispute will bring House Cayston further glory upon our golden halls. And once our Lord Regent is recognized, a suitable prince shall be trained and guided by his hand will claim the throne and bring prosperity to the principality, exclaimed the old man as he eyed his son carefully. The Duke has entrusted you greatly, Andrew. I'm certain that you will be rewarded in the manner your heart desires. For several moments, Andrew hesitated to answer, his heart swelling with desire. Loyalty is its own reward, as the great Julius Astor intended. Now leave me be, Lord Tamirin. I must make plans and compensate for House Guimore's unexpected declaration of fealty. Their involvement will bring discontent and likely light skirmishes to our bordering systems. Before I leave you, my son, for I too have more important matters to attend to, I'm certain that you're aware that our Lord Regent has issued the order to avoid the purposeful elimination of the Reaper and that of the pretentious commoner with airs of grandeur. His eyes narrowed knowingly. You will comply. As our Lord Regent commands, they will be captured should our path cross, Andrew replied, then his expression hardened. To the best of my abilities. Tamirin nodded in approval. To the best of your abilities. The connection ended a moment later, leaving Andrew alone in his quarters. Mere seconds later, a single thought brought a holographic display of Cayston territory, and his current position was marked on the map on the Retellus system. The Fenrir system was also highlighted, along with the other systems in which the Noir Navio had been spotted. He analyzed it carefully, as he'd done so before Jade contacted him and his conversation with his Lord Father. I wonder, Princess, if you've garnered a sense of overconfidence as of late. 5 of my kin are under your control. How many more will it take to lure me out? To force my hand into action? 10? 20? 50? He chuckled darkly. Redford Kalen, the Vorpal Strike, sits on the captain's chair, your right hand. Your Royal Marines and Cynthia Winfield are your protectors, your trump cards. Wyatt Staples, he is your wild card, and your ship is a safe refuge. Tapping his chin slowly, he began to pace alongside the length of his tactical table, humming to himself as he did so. Do you believe yourself to be the predator amidst my own forest, Princess? Well, it seems that you've forgotten that claws and fangs are equally as good as a scythe to lay your enemies low. Coming to a halt, he pointed at a system merely 2 jumps away. He couldn't leave the preparations for Operation Hammerblow unattended for any extended period of time, nor could he excuse a sizable contingent of ships from being dispatched on short notice. Redford Kalen would never allow a confrontation against a force like that. Nor do I believe you to be gullible. Such a lure won't work on you, Reaper. But an appetizing prize, perhaps? Alone, vulnerable, and ripe for the taking? He contemplated the trail left on the Reaper's wake. Her objectives were now in the open, and thus he could take an educated guess where she would strike next. The lowliest members of House Cayston were useless, but she couldn't simply take those safely stationed in well-protected systems at the heart of his house's territory. She needed to target vulnerable positions with worthwhile members, important enough to warrant attention without wasting her time. That would make her predictable. But first, he needed to set the location of his trap in advance. He gave out a small, satisfied smile as his eyes read the name of the system he'd selected for a suitable trap. The Dappenshaw system. M-class star with a series of domed colonies on its only 2 rocky planets and a medium-sized civilian-class trade and dock station. The resurgence of magnificence will be a most tempting target. And now the lure, he said to himself, analyzing the map for a moment before setting his gaze on a neighboring system called Danesti. Accessing the network for a brief moment, he pulled on the available information into a quick data stream upload. A few seconds later, he found what he suspected was present in the system. Kendall Caiston, a distant cousin, nothing more than a Castellan from one of their branch houses dispatched 2 decades before, oversee the Danesti system and its multiple jump points. You will do, he said, satisfied, and took a step back. If you're hunting for Caistons, then I'll give you what you're looking for, Princess. Perhaps then you'll learn that the hunter may become the hunted. A deep hum rumbled in his chest. I truly am no better than my father, cousin. You will serve me and his Lord Regent well, even if you don't know it. Turning away from the display, he made his way to his weapons rack, grabbed a knife, twirled it around in his hand, and stopped only to make a cut across his left thumb, staining the blade with his blood. Then, in a swift motion, he launched it at a large, sliced-up and punctured sigil of House Staples, serving as his favored target practice, impaling its right wing. To the best of my abilities, Wyatt Staples, he said in a low tone, marking his promise in blood. Now he needed to prime his trap. Noirnavio, Clara's quarters. The feelings coursing through his body were like a calm storm of conflicting waves crashing against each other. On one side, his rage was present, managed as it was. On the other hand, he had just gotten confirmation that his parents and brothers had been kidnapped, but that they were safe. Yet the lack of demands ignited the former, whilst relief soothed the other. And in the middle, he was left with no clear direction to take. It seems this isn't helping you nearly as much as I had hoped, Wyatt, commented Clara as she stared at the mismatched thing her prized pilot had in his hands. At her side, Cynthia was also focused, frustrated as always, trying to create something that resembled a long sock rather than a scarf. No, it's not, Wyatt confirmed with a defeated grumble before letting his knitting needles fall on the table. I was trying to make a cup holder. Mom likes to make them and give them to her students, or used to. He sighed, leaning back on his seat and covering his face for a long moment. Hey, Cynthia began, taking the chance to put her needles down. Reaching out, she placed a hand on his right shoulder. They'll be fine, Wyatt. Clara said so herself, didn't she? The fact that they didn't ask for a ransom means the situation is unusual but not terrible. They are safe, being held or protected in a sense from those who truly wanted to bring harm upon them. They shall be found, Wyatt. They will be returned to you safely. As your friend, I won't allow you to suffer this alone. And should hard befall them, then I'm certain that my princess shall unleash the bloodrend with vengeance in search of just retribution. Gently squeezing his shoulder, she stared into his eyes, brimming with cold determination. That I can promise. Wyatt smiled back at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, and reached out to her, grabbing her shoulder in return as the two of them shared a weak but meaningful shake. It ended when they both heard an excited, playful chuckle. They both turned simultaneously to a grinning blonde princess staring intently at them. Oh, I'm going to upload that perfect moment into a data chit and have it printed and painted for my enjoyment, said Clara, her eyes flickering with light for a moment as she stared at her two companions. Rest assured, my dear Wyatt, Cynthia speaks truthfully. You are a Knight Banneret of House Astor, the head of House Staples. This insolence will not go unanswered. And more importantly, you are a dear, true friend to us. We won't leave you alone, came her promise, finishing with a tender smile and the same sincerity he saw in Cynthia's eyes. I can rest easier now. Thank you, he finally said, letting go of Cynthia as she did the same. His eyes drifted to his needles and he sighed. Although I don't think I can continue with knitting today. Oh, most excellent opportunity. We had nary a chance to continue our belated talk regarding our siblings. Hurriedly, she grabbed a datapad and moved closer to Wyatt, sitting right next to him, and she all but pressed it against his hands. It came to life, showcasing a picture he'd not seen before. All 8 Astor siblings were together, wearing formal attire, beautiful long dresses for the women and tight suits for the men. He immediately recognized the prince standing at the center, taking his place as the firstborn and the prince apparent at the time that picture had been taken. Then to his left was Megan Astor. Once again, Wyatt felt like diverting his gaze upon laying his eyes on her. Describing her as stunningly beautiful didn't do her justice in his mind. Then next to her was Clara, wearing one of her many cordial masks. In front of the two was a younger girl, probably around 16, with those same violet eyes that marked her as an Astor. Her hair, blonde and long, nearly reaching her ankles, was smooth as silk. Her skin was pearly white, and her flawless, charming smile brought an involuntary smile to his face. You've seen Megan before, pretentious buxom that she is. It'd be unfair of me not to mention that she's kind and open with her feelings. I cannot stand her, yet I miss her. Clara shook her head before pointing at the other girl. That's Ruby. Don't be fooled by her charming smile. Insult her once, and you'll gain an enemy for life, she warned with a finishing giggle. Wyatt followed her finger as she pointed to Alexander. With a glare, she skipped past him to the other man next to him. He was also handsome, with short blonde hair, orange lipstick, and odd golden patterns around his eyes. He also noticed that, unlike the rest of his siblings, he had a slight tan and was wearing some sort of device or garment on his right ear. Let me guess, that's Caldro? That is indeed him, Clara confirmed. Of all my siblings, I would have guessed that Caldro would be the one to betray us in this conflict. If arrogance had a face, it'd be his. Selfish, condescending, cheating, yet I can't help but miss him, too. Clara shook her head and pointed at the next one. The seventh Astor sibling couldn't be other than Giovanni. He was certain of it. He was nearly identical to the prince, but his facial features were less defined. His hair reached his shoulders, and his expression exuded supreme confidence. He plays the game almost as well as I do, but his boundless charisma makes him superior. Giovanni feels more at home in balls, banquets, and other social events than in his own quarters. He cannot tolerate not being the center of attention, but he is true and loyal. Finally, her finger drifted to the last member of the photo, the youngest Astor. He couldn't be older than 14, but it was already clear he would become a handsome man with fair skin, curious eyes, a broad smile, and hair tied up in an elegant ponytail. And that's my youngest brother, Leon. He is tenacious, if nothing else. Impulsive to a fault and competitive to his own detriment. Wyatt let out a laugh. Reminds me of Wham. I haven't seen him since I left. I wonder if he stopped trying to eat raw lachoas. Does he cause too much trouble for your parents? He asked out of reflex, but tensed a moment after the words left his mouth. Then, as he stared at the picture more, the storm within him was replaced by a shallow drizzle. I'm sorry. My family was taken away, but they are still alive. I forgot that your parents are dead, Clara. His gaze focused on the picture as he continued. Giovanni is missing. Alexander betrayed you. The prince is dealing with the entire principality. Your other siblings are being held captive, who knows where. And Cynthia? Your family is faring no better. Only Juliana is free and fighting back against Duke Cornelius next to the prince, he scoffed bitterly. And here I am, a commoner complaining about his little problems to royalty and a member of a great house. Cynthia sat next to him, taking the datapad in her hands, while Clara reached for Wyatt's left hand and held it tightly. Don't chastise yourself for placing them above everything else, Wyatt. Few are so lucky as to have a loving family such as yours, said the princess. The red-armored woman returned the datapad, showing her and her siblings together at what appeared to be the tail end of a banquet, alongside what he presumed were their parents. Unlike the others, she was wearing her red armor, though she appeared to be slightly younger. Those are my siblings. We bicker sometimes, but we all get along well. Pointing her index finger, she named them one by one. All women had long hair, and the men had short hair, all of them blue-eyed. That's Juliana. That's Yendol, Cordelia, Milo, Astrid, Suki, and Marius. The woman here is our mother, Leona Winfield, she said, pointing at a beautiful but tough-looking woman. Then she pointed at a rugged man with a proud blue beard and mustache. And that's our father, Benjamin Winfield. And no, he's not a Winfield by birth. He's an Azurite native and came from one of our vassal minor houses. You are so dry with your presentation, Cynthia, said Clara with pity in her voice, which made her bodyguard blush slightly. Why don't you tell us about your family, Wyatt? We can return the favor too, offered Cynthia, still blushing. Wyatt smiled, squeezing Clara's hand and taking the datapad with his free hand. I'd like that. For the next hour, the trio forgot about their knitting session in favor of something far more thrilling and needed.